This is an RNZ podcast.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Your Money with me, Mary Holm. Thanks for taking just a few minutes to listen in while Jessie Mulligan and I talk through some useful ideas about how to make your money work better for you. Just remember though, this is guidance. Final decisions are up to you. Over to Jessie.
Let's talk to Mary Holm now, personal finance expert. Hi.
Hi, Jessie.
How's it going?
Two things I wanted to say to you before we get on to it.
Good.
One, that I love that song, They Dance Alone, the Sting song.
You
that
did,
you played.
yeah.
Yeah, I think it Sting's. It's perhaps his best song. It's his most moving song.
Great.
There's a video of it with women dancing, and it's just the story behind it is haunting.
Yeah, you and Colin Morris, eh?
Yeah.
What sort of era would that song be?
I don't know.
What was it called?
They Dance Alone.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's, as he said about the women in
1987.
1987 was it? Yes, dancing because their
Because the
husbands and children and men have been taken away.
Something about the other
Yeah.
Sting songs that you hear them to a certain point and then you don't really get excited about them anymore, in my humble
that's
opinion.
right. That's right. And that's one that's just stuck with me.
Great.
And the other thing I just wanted to note, the government announced this morning that it's going to get on with this insurance kind of on bank accounts. You know, it's come up before when we've talked about it. So it's not coming in until 2023, which is a pity because that's a while away. But they will be doing this insurance of people's deposits up to $100,000 in bank accounts. And so if the bank goes belly up, you get your money back.
Is that quite big news?
Well, yeah. They've been talking about doing it, and they were talking about doing it with 50,000, and now they've raised it to 100. And there was kind of nothing coming out of the government for quite a long time. I was emailing off to them every now and then and saying, "Hey, what's happening?" And they're saying, "Oh, just behind the scenes."
Use your government stuff,
yes, yeah. So it is a while, and in the meantime, I still think, if people are putting seriously big money into bank accounts, it's perhaps not a bad idea to have it in more than one bank anyway. Not that there's any suggestion that the banks are in financial trouble, but it wouldn't hurt to spread your money around like that. But so that it reminds me of the capital gains tax, and that New Zealand is one of the few sort of civilised, advanced countries in the world that hasn't got capital gains tax and doesn't have insurance on bank deposits. So we're finally kind of catching up. I mean, there's been these good reasons offered for not doing either of them. It's not kind of like we just haven't got round to it. There have been some good arguments made as to why we shouldn't do both of those things, but I don't buy the arguments. So we're making progress.
We had an interesting chat, probably too large a topic for the scope of today's show, but just for your interest, we had an interesting chat a couple of days ago, maybe it was yesterday, about a new scheme by the mortgage broker Squirrel that they will give you if you come up with a 5% deposit, they'll lend you the extra 15% to get you over the line to get your house deposit.
I must have a look at that.
Yeah, you should. It's really fascinating. And it reminded me a little bit, I mean, it's much different to this, but the UK has a new scheme as well where the government will guarantee the extra 15% to get first-time buyers to 20%.
Really?
Yeah, which I thought was a great novelty. We've got a version of that here, but targeted very low income.
That's right. It's because the deposit is the thing that's people are stuck with. Apparently, quite a lot of people are paying more in rent than they would in mortgage payments. But they just can't get the deposit together. Yeah, we could talk about that more another time, actually, because it's a good topic. Parents helping out in many different ways. And I'm getting some letters for my Herald column about that.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, Bernie Madoff died last week, and it brought back all these memories. He's the one the American who ran the biggest Ponzi scheme in history. A Ponzi scheme is where you have investors putting money in, and then they seem to be making really good returns. So more and more investors put money in, and when someone wants their money out, the person running the scheme is actually just giving them the money that new investors have put in.
That's pretty clever.
In other words, they're not making the returns they say they're making.
Yeah.
With Bernie Madoff, it was really interesting because he was saying that he was making about 10% on people's money. Now, that's not huge. That's not astounding money. In fact, there have been quite a few...
He was telling them that he was returning 10%.
Telling the world that that people were getting 10%. And there have been quite a few periods in the share market where there have been average returns of 10% over, 5 or 10 years at times. The thing was that it was this kind of steady return of right around 10%. And the people who have looked back at what was going on said that should have been a warning to everybody. You don't get returns that high that are steady. You don't get, 10, 9.8, 10.6, that sort of thing. If you average 10, it means you're in a high-risk investment, and it probably means you'll have negative returns some years and 20% other years. And then meanwhile, so Bernie was in the news for dying in prison. He was imprisoned for 150 years, and he was already in his 70s, I think, when he went to prison. So it was, very obvious what was going to happen there. And he just died. And meanwhile, in late February, David Ross, who's kind of New Zealand's version of Bernie, I was just thinking as I was driving, and I should have a look actually at the amount of money he ripped off per head of New Zealand's population, see how it compares with Bernie. But in late February, he was released from prison. He was released early. People thought before his whole Ponzi empire collapsed that they had $450 million in there, and in the end they got out $24 million, so it was, or is that Bernie Madoff's number? No, that must be David Ross's numbers.
Yeah, we did. For people who are interested, we did a longer interview about his schemes in our crimes segment end of last year. You can look it up.
Oh, I must.
The figure I have here, jailed in 2013 for 10 years. After the Ponzi scheme collapsed, he owed investors about $115 million.
Okay, yes. At one point it was... Look, the numbers are actually all over the place.
Yeah.
And one of the interesting things about David Ross was they went back to the people who had got their money out before it collapsed and got extra out, because they thought, so let's say they had put in 50,000 and they got 100,000 out because he was supposedly making these fantastic returns. And the liquidators went back and said, hey, you should give back the 50, the profits you made. You can keep the money you put in. And there was a lot of people opposing that at the time. Of course, they said, no, I want to keep the lot. But they did get that money back, I think, in every case, which helped to distribute to the other people who'd lost a heck of a lot, which always seemed kind of fair to me. But there's been a lot of regulation since in New Zealand and in America, in both countries, where this kind of thing can't go on, well, not in quite the way it did before anyway, but there's never any guarantees. But these days, like companies have to have independent custodians, somebody quite separate from them watching where the money's going, and they have to have independent auditors coming in and seeing whether the numbers are right. Because in both those cases, these guys were just making up numbers. It started out, apparently, I was just reading a really good Brian Gaynor story about it this morning. David Ross started out doing sort of legitimate share investments for clients, but then he made a mistake, and he was feeding back that they were getting higher returns than they really were, and it sounds like it was a genuine mistake. But instead of saying, oh, everybody, I'm sorry, I've made a mistake, probably because that would have been deeply humiliating for him, because he was becoming a bit of a hero for getting such high returns. So he didn't want to confess to doing it wrong, so he then took sort of riskier and riskier investments, a lot of them in Aussie mining shares and that, to try and get back the money that he'd lost, and it just got out of hand.
It's like a gambling addiction, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yes. And with pride and all that involved. Some big names caught in these things, and that's one of the messages I want to get through to listeners, is people sometimes say, oh, well, I'm too sophisticated, I wouldn't get caught by a scam. But in America, for example, Steven Spielberg, a foundation he ran, lost a lot of money to Bernie Madoff. Now, Spielberg might not be a financial whiz, but he's a pretty bright guy, and you'd think he'd have had pretty bright financial people watching over what was going on. In New Zealand, Mark Hotchin of Hanover Finance, which in itself collapsed later on, but he has admitted that he was investing with David Ross.
Wow.
So people get caught up. Friends recommend. What happens is these brilliant returns come along, and people say, "This is fantastic. I'm going to tell my friends about it," and that's how these things build up.
You're quite firm on not taking tips from friends, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. Yes, it's really, and I mean, all sorts of financial advice. You hear people all the time. Someone the other day telling me about their friend getting a reverse mortgage and telling everyone, "Oh, she should go out and get a reverse mortgage." She's about 70 and she's all this wonderful money she's going to get, and she's going to be paying, if she lives quite a long time, going to be paying a lot of compounding interest on that. Just friends want to help one another out, but if they're not really experts, and not every lawyer is an expert, and not even every accountant is an expert in finance.
Right.
Yeah.
I've got a friend who often say to me, "Oh, my mate, the accountant reckons I should be doing such and such," and it sounds so legit, doesn't it? Coming from somebody who knows presumably more about money than I do.
Yep, and some of the accountants do know a lot about finance. I'm not saying they all don't, but some of them are more, they know the numbers of companies and that, but they don't know a lot about investments and so on. So just be careful. But generally speaking, I thought, oh gosh, New Zealanders, it's about time with New Zealanders looking around for returns that are better than bank term deposits, it's about time we had another look at all the scams that are out there. And the FMA, the Financial Markets Authority, has got some really good stuff on their website now, and I'm not sure that enough ordinary investors know about that. If you go onto the FMA website and just do a search on scams, or click on the investors section and then have a look at scams there, they say more than one in five New Zealanders have been approached by a scammer. Men more often than women, over 70s more often than average. I would say there's probably a whole lot more people that didn't even realise they were being approached by a scammer but just said go away, when someone rings you. Cryptocurrency was the most common one that people had been approached about.
So often scams coincide with FOMO, right?
Yes, they do. Absolutely.
The fear of missing out.
Yes. It's
and you read these headlines about people making money on Bitcoin, you think, oh, maybe I'm stupid not putting my money into it. And then someone calls you up and says, hey, I've got the opportunity for you.
Phone calls. Look, the FMA says that in New Zealand it is illegal to sell financial products through an unsolicited meeting, for example, a cold call or uninvited email. So it's actually illegal. I didn't realise that. But even regardless of that, you shouldn't, if someone rings you up, get real. Why are they ringing you up and telling you about this wonderful deal? We're running a bit short of time, but I just wanted to... Are we? Oh, good.
We can go right up to 25 too, if you like.
Oh, can we? Great, because there's some interesting stuff. Most of this from the FMA's website. They say cryptocurrencies is the most common thing that people, so Bitcoin, etc., that people are being approached about now. And then investment software packages, seminars, shares, etc. Most commonly people are approached by email and then social media and then phone. So in all those ways, people are being approached. And a big rise in what they're calling imposter scams, which are where you think you're dealing with a legitimate company. They kind of take over the real company's name and can put up a website that looks awfully like the real website. And the FMA's got some good stuff on how to spot a dodgy website. So if you were looking on a website and you thought, this looks pretty good, you might want to just check up that it is actually who they say they are. The types of scams the FMA talks about, one of them is boiler room scams, and these are mostly shares but also foreign exchange, cryptocurrencies, etc., where the boiler rooms, I'm not quite sure where the expression comes from, but you kind of get this picture of a whole lot of people sitting in a room phoning people up or emailing people and pushing stuff at them. And here's a little quote from the FMA, because I thought, whoa, it made me feel a little bit, my blood ran a bit cold when I read this. They are professional, persistent and convincing. Tactics include fake surveys, social media ads, hoax calls from, quote, senior executives, celebrity endorsements, polished websites and glossy brochures. But when you try to get your money back, they have excuses or they just stop responding to you. So they're very clever at making you think they're on the up and up and everything's great. And as I say, some pretty sophisticated people have got caught by it. So don't think you can sort of sniff it out. And then another type of scams are Ponzi schemes, which we've just talked about, the David Ross and Bernie Madoff. Also just high-risk products. The FMA points out that cryptocurrencies and foreign exchange and binary options. Now, binary options, they're quick trades on price fluctuations with 50-50 odds of winning. So you get on, they catch you into doing these trades with a 50-50 chance of winning. But in fact, if you don't end up winning overall, with each trade, it looks as though you've got a 50-50 chance. But in overall, people get totally ripped off. There's been a lot of overseas. A long time ago, like a couple of years ago, there were a lot of Israeli firms that were doing binary options, I remember, but God knows where they're coming from now. I mean, all over the world. Then there's just share scams where there's high-pressure tactics where they say you've got to get in quick before the IPO, the initial public offering. This company, if you get in now, you're going to earn a whole lot of money. There's really often pressure to do things fast. And all of these.
That's another your big warning.
Yeah, you really must.
That's with anyone, right? Anyone who tells you need to sign now or it's not going to be here tomorrow. That's when Mary says walk away.
Walk away. Even, and maybe 1 in 10 of them is good. But there are plenty of other good investments out there where you can take your time to think about it. Just do not ever feel like you've got to get in now to catch something, because nearly always that is a sign that someone is ripping you off, or at least being too sharp a seller. And often with the share scams, they ask you to put just a little bit of money in at the beginning, and people think, oh, well, I'll put in $100, and if I lose it, who cares? But the trouble is you're in there, and then they start coming up with all kinds of reasons. I just put just another 100, and before you know it, you've got thousands in there. So it's kind of like once you've got your toe in the water, it's quite hard to take it back out again. So don't think, I'll just put a little bit in and see how things go. Excuses, they give you excuses why you can't sell your shares in a hurry, and this is share scams. And then there are fees you've got to pay before you can sell and get your money back, and on it goes. Then there's software packages and seminars, which we've talked about before. Free seminars, exclusive events where you're invited and not many other people are invited. That's often with a lot of these things. Bernie Madoff was like that. It was kind of like an exclusive club for people. He was Jewish, and a lot of the Jewish community in America got caught up because it was kind of like they were all in this club together, and he was showing them some brilliant stuff, which must have been sickening for them. Yeah. So there's all these different types of things. A couple of tips here. If you're wondering about something, a really easy thing to do before you do anything else is Google the name of the company and the word scam, or the name of the company and the word warning, or the name of the company and the word reviews. Although be careful of reviews, because there can be fake reviews on there to make it look good. But if you just do that, so often I've found, this is interesting. Up comes some stuff saying, no, stay away from this.
Yeah, I see the FMA has a running list of current warnings.
It does. It does, yes. And so you can always go there. If you just Googled the name of the firm and warning, up would come the FMA's warning, among others.
Listen to some of the latest ones. Aotearoa Green Sustainable Co-op. That sounds good, doesn't it?
It does. Yes.
Cash Forex Group. They sound like they know what they're doing.
Yes.
BitQT, Baycam Investment, GHC Trades, Horizon Online Limited, Cans Trades. These are all listed as scams to avoid on the FMA website.
Yes, isn't that interesting? Yes,
and they're all in the last month.
Yes, there's plenty of them. So just Google the name, for goodness sake, and the word scam. Don't have anything to do with anything that's not based in New Zealand, because the FMA and the others, the Commerce Commission and others, are security. There are other people also in government trying to help people with scams, but the minute you say it was offshore, they say sorry. Because what can the New Zealand government do, actually? Go into another country, and they might go to the American government or quite often it's an exotic country, an unusual one. Go to that government and say, hey, one of our citizens has been ripped off, and typically that government will say, well, we're terribly sorry. We can't do anything about it, Just don't mess with offshore. And the FMA also says use a licensed or registered financial service provider, because they've got to then, if they're registered in New Zealand, they've got to be have a physical address. And one thing I saw, which was quite an interesting tip, if you've got a physical address in New Zealand, or actually anywhere in the world, go on Google Maps and have a look at the satellite picture of the building that they're saying it's based in. Just that won't necessarily, it could be a big flash building. It doesn't necessarily tell you anything, but it might, if it turns out to be somebody's backyard. But I wouldn't even be going that far. You're smelling danger before you're checking all this out. If you think you have been scammed, the FMA's also got some help for what you can do, but don't feel too comforted by that, because quite often, even if it's a New Zealand-based firm, you don't get your money back, or you certainly don't get it all back. So just be careful, people. And one final thing, if you've been scammed, don't respond to ads. And if you're Googling the company, up will come a website that says, we'll help you get your money back from Fred Blogg's cryptocurrency. And you've always got to put some money into them first. Just give us $100 and we'll get your $2,000 or $200,000 back again. And that you're just getting ripped off again. So it's hideous. So, yeah,
I just wanted to note as well on the FMA website, we talked, I talked a bit about who's most likely to be targeted. And
yes.
There is a special tab, Scams Information for Pacific Communities here. And they talk about Pacific communities, Samoa and Tongan communities, for example, and the scammers using the familiarity, the trust that comes with being approached from someone from your own ethnic group.
Yeah.
And there is information on those scams that you can download there, like PDF sheets and... Sorry, I'm talking slowly because the website stopped loading. But they've got PDF sheets in Tongan and in Samoan with some more information about that. Yeah.
And beware in those communities if the religious leader says, hey, I recommend this, because quite often the scammer will con the religious leader, the minister or whatever,
right.
And they think genuinely that they're helping their flock into a really good investment. It's horrible when that happens.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you, Mary.
It's a pleasure, Jesse.
Great to have you here. Mary Holm, our personal finance expert.